Well, it's not too hard to guess what the innovators are going to buy on the basis of. They're going to buy on the basis of performance. After all, that's why they're there. They're saying, hey, this is kind of cool. I want to play for it. I want to play with it. I want something that's going to do some really cool things for me. So they're looking for a specific kind of performance that they can play around with. Typically, you get these kind of innovation communities developing at these early stages of introduction of a technology, particularly where there's no strong dominant design to sort of define the features and functionalities, and really what you're trying to do is to figure out what should be the features and functionalities. If you think about that, what's going on now is people are trying to figure out what's happening. I will give you the classic example of this, literally a classic example. Think about writing. There was a time when there was no writing. Then later on there is writing. If you remember your Plato, the major figure in the Platonic dialogues is a guy named Socrates. The difference between Socrates and Plato is Socrates is illiterate. He doesn't write. Plato does. The early dialogues are very much like reading Homer. They're, I believe the appropriate term is mnemonic devices. They help you remember the story. So they're basically writing down the story as it would be spoken. And thus the story has a certain rhythm and a certain presentation. By the late dialogues of Plato, it's very different. The story is no longer just an aid to memory, to repeating so that you can repeat it to other people as an oral tradition. The story is now meant to be read. It's very complicated. It has subplots, all sorts of things are twisted around. You're trying to understand specific words and how specific words relate to other words. This whole 9 yards that go into what they call a Straussian interpretation of Plato. But what's happened is you've gone across a Rubicon between no writing and writing. And what is Socrates arguing about? He's fighting with the poets. Why does he fight with the poets? Because the poets represent another end user group or another group of people who are trying to figure out what writing is. And Socrates and the poets are fighting about what's the appropriate character for writing, what should be the dominant design for writing. So when we have those kinds of situations, that's where we have performance-based buying, and it happens, as I said, very early on in a technology or where there's a really clear, overwhelming, powerful need, which is the exception, that is military situations, health, health, safety, those kind of things sometimes will drive rigorous performance-based buying. When we come back, we'll talk about the next type of buying.